Miruna has done the analysis of our survey. So as I said in the beginning, we did a qualitative survey and a quantitative survey amongst a whole bunch of data leaders in Europe and data practitioners. And Miruna, once she's mic'd up, she's going to share the learnings from that.
Yeah,
No, you're good. You're good. Here you go. The floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, just give me a second here. Yeah, this one works. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. So I will be sharing some key insights that we got from an extensive market research study we did here at Dataminded over the last couple of months. The data came in, we're currently processing it. We're building an interactive dashboard, so if you're interested to access the data yourself, at the end of the talk, I will share a link with you where you can sign up to get access to the dashboard. We're planning on launching it later this month, so stick around till the end. So why would you be interested? What was our market research about? So you'll notice that the title of my talk actually is the state of data work and not the state of data in general. And that's because this was the focus of our research. We wanted to find out what exactly are the challenges of data professionals nowadays. What are they struggling in with their day-to-day jobs? And the way we set out to find this was by asking one big question. This question, we didn't really put it like that. This is shortened to fit on the slide. But we asked it in two ways. So the first way was in a very open-ended way. We basically talked to people. We tried to get them to pour their hearts out and tell us what their problems are in their day-to-day jobs. And I'd like to recommend this book that we used as a guide for everyone that doesn't know it. It's a really short book, but it really helps when you're conducting customer interviews or when asking open questions in any sort of environment. Okay, so we found 32 data engineers, architects, and leaders here in Belgium that we had in-depth 1-hour-long conversations with. And I say we because there were a few of us who did this. Chris, our CEO, helped running some of these interviews. Niels and Lieve, who are senior data engineers. Christophe, who's a senior consultant, myself. But really most of the work here was done by Pascal Knappe, our CTO. And so by the end of this exercise, we noticed that there were some clusters, some groups of challenges that kept coming back in conversations. And so then we moved on to a second phase of our research, which was asking the big question in a closed-ended way, and now to a much larger population. And so we sourced 151 data professionals now. We ran an online survey, and based on an estimated population size of 7.5 million data professionals in Europe, based on the much more relevant population size of 3.5 million data professionals who have an active LinkedIn account. This means that we had like almost 8% margin of error and a 95% confidence level of our findings. All right, so I'm going to share with you 4 things that we chose to share today in my allocated 10 minutes. The first is I chose one hopeful insight that came out of the data about just European data work in general. The second is one key trend that we found looking at the data in the way organizations structure their data function. I'm going to divulge what's the most frequent problem in data, the most frequently mentioned, and then share, what's the most painful problem in data. All right, so before I get started, who am I? Any sort of presentation like this is an interpretation of somebody over the facts that they're going to share with you. And so your interpreter today is myself. I've been with Dataminded for 6 months now. I'm a marketer. Before that, I ran marketing for an IoT software company, and before that, I was a business advisor with the UK Department of Trade. And I also want to share a fun fact about myself. We are here at our flagship event, and I also want to say that I've been a data data-minded individual for as long as I remember, way before I joined Dataminded as a company. And I use the word data-minded here as a measure of an inclination, a disposition to use data where it makes sense. And I just used 2 screenshots here to demonstrate what I mean by being a data-minded individual. The first one represents a year of my life, 2024, with every circle representing a day, and then the second represents the first 3 months of my newborn's life. And why I'm sharing this with you, apart from the slight entertainment value, because I want to use it as a segue into asking this question at the very start. I was kind of like wanting to frame my whole presentation under this question: what is the role of data in our lives? And I think the role of data in our lives is very different depending on how you look at it. You know, what role does it have in our personal lives? You know, I don't strive to get actionable insights from my year in pixels. You know, I'm not aiming to maximize my green dots, my green days, and minimize my red days. That's not what I'm using it for. Come speak to me after the presentation if you're curious how am I using it for. You know, in research, it's the whole basis for scientific discovery, but what does it mean in business? What's the role of data in business? And I put there the asterisk. Remember this question, because it will be important at some point in my presentation. It will come back. Okay, so obligatory demographic slides for every presentation that aims to share research findings. So in terms of our, the company that we cover with this research, it's only companies that have a minimum of 1 million in annual revenue. But it's within this sample size, it's mostly 70% are large and very large companies, and 30% are small and medium. In terms of respondent demographics, it's again mostly data professionals that are seniors that have quite a few years of experience, and 40% hold senior leadership positions, and close to 70% have some sort of role in data-related decisions. So you may have noticed, if you like charts and you looked at the charts that I shared earlier, that I flagged 2 of those with the light bulb there, and that's because it brings me to the first key insight that I want to share with you today. One of the cool things about this study was that we deliberately focused on the European market, which means that we can draw some conclusions about the shape of the European data landscape overall. And I wanted to share this one in particular with you because it's an optimistic insight, I think, and given the current situation, I think that's useful. So you see what this picture paints is actually a vibrant data ecosystem, talking about both at the individual and the organization level, the activity level of several professionals being involved in several data initiatives at a time, and 100% of the companies surveyed ran at least and completed at least one data initiative last year. And again, this is the customer perspective. It's not the vendor perspective. It's not companies that offer data solutions. This is coming from customers. Okay, so I think one really important factor in any sort of conversation related to data and data work is, and of course this came out also in Johnny's presentation, is how do organizations structure their data function? Again, back to the centralized versus decentralized situation. So with this graph, so this is coming from our data, from the survey, what I want to highlight is 3 things. So the first thing, I numbered them there on the chart. The first thing is that the largest proportion of a mostly centralized data function we see in the second to largest revenue bracket, and this is where the most efforts are put to support growth at scale and to centralize. And that's also where you see the lowest proportion of decentralized data functions, so the 10% there. The second point I wanted to make is that the largest proportion of a mostly decentralized data function here we see in the smallest revenue bracket, so 1 to 50 million euro revenue per year, so the SMEs. Which makes sense. And then the trend line there, the line trending upwards, represents the proportion of organizations that settle on a sort of a hybrid model. And you see that there's increased adoption of hybrid models the bigger the company gets. So centralization and decentralization, that's not only a question about the distribution of people and how you distribute data roles across the organization. You place engineers in your central IT team and scientists with your business units and so on. It's also a matter of the distribution of budgets. And so we see in the data that there's, the shape, the structure of the data organization is reflected in the way budgets for data are controlled and allocated, with mostly hybrid organization having a hybrid mixed approach to data control. Organizations that are mostly centralized, the budget control lies with central IT, and so on. And so another way to look at this really is, this is obviously a sort of a bird's eye view approach, but I think it gives an indication, and I think perfectly reflects what Johnny was saying earlier about tendencies. So this is the tendency also that's come out of the data. So across these axes, when you look at company size, at least, you see organizations tend to start, the smaller startups, companies hire their first data role, and so that by definition, when you have one guy doing all the data jobs, you have a centralized data function. And then the company grows, you get to slightly bigger companies, you hire a few more data people, but then everybody starts doing their own thing, and so it becomes decentralized. From everybody does their own thing, now you have, as the company grows, a few teams all doing their own thing with their own tools and their own processes. So that starts to become tricky, and so we see tendency to go back towards centralization or towards a hybrid model when the companies are really growing and they're really hitting the really large data organizations, where you see sort of the panic ensues, and then they go, well, no, this cannot work anymore, so we need to centralize, going back to IT. But then, the growth continues. Centralization at that point becomes a bottleneck. So what happens is you see another push for at least a hybrid model or decentralization. And with the very, very, very large companies, then they tend to stabilize somewhere in the middle with hybrid models of organization. So back to the problems. As a reminder, so first we did this qualitative approach where we had interviews with people, and we already published our findings. So we published the report in January. There's a QR code there. If you're interested, it goes straight to the PDF. This is basically what we found out. As with any qualitative study, there's a fair amount of interpretation here. So this is our interpretation of what we discovered through the interviews. There was a lot of talk around demonstrating value from data initiatives. Data quality came up a lot. We grouped it there with conversations around autonomy and self-service, although that may not be how it's reflected later, you will see. And a lot of trouble and difficulty around collaboration across departments, alignment, governance, things like that. So it's organizational complexity that came out, not necessarily technical complexity, which is another issue that we keep, talking and hearing and talking about, but it doesn't really come up, the technical complexity side. So did the quant replicate the qual findings? Don't bother to read those. I'll zoom in a minute. The idea here is that the short answer is somewhat. What was not reflected so clearly was the autonomy side. Well, you will see there that enabling data autonomy is a bit towards the bottom, but all the rest have been sort of replicated by the quant. But that was only a partial view of our findings, because we actually collected data on these two dimensions, both in terms of frequency and in terms of impact. So again, don't bother to read these. I'm zooming in here on the top 5. So zooming in on the top 5. Can you read it? Read on in the VEX, or should I read it out? Yeah, okay. So it would appear that data quality is both the most frequent problem and the problem that hurts the most. We have alignment between data initiatives and business, building data literacy, demonstrating ROI, and data governance implementation. But data quality seems to be the one that's most frequent and most painful. But actually, when we go back to the long list that I showed earlier, we actually saw that there were 3 things there on that long list that were basically 3 things of saying the same thing, 3 different ways of saying the same thing. And if you count those, then it's actually alignment between business and data that emerges as the problem that's most frequently listed. And there's some nuance there that was relevant to some parts of our analysis, but really for this purpose, it's the same thing. It's either strategic or workflow alignment, but it's alignment between business and data. And this is true, regardless of the company size. It's true regardless of the geography. It's true regardless of the industry, and it's true regardless of the job profile, which means that basically an engineer and a data leader tends to list this as one of their top problems. And so remember, I asked you at the beginning to remember this question, what is the role of data in business? Because it seems like it's an important question when you have data professionals across such a diverse range of roles, when you have professionals that are on both sides of this tension, of this divide, all mention this as a problem. I think it's an important question to ask. What is the role of data in business? How are we in this situation where alignment between these two is such a big issue? So going back to the most painful problem, that did turn out to be data quality indeed. And what I'm showing here is that even when we calculate the importance score relative to the people who listed that challenge in their responses, it's still data quality that emerges as the most painful problem. Based on a points allocated points system. So we have opinions here at Dataminded about what's to be done about this. So I just wanted to flag that tomorrow at our event, our technical day, we have a really interesting talk about data contracts that is going into a bit of more detail around, some of the sort of solutions that are there in this space to solve data quality problem. So here again, it's the top 10 challenges displayed on the list. You see data quality and alignment between business and data as both, highest frequency and highest impact, with some differences between them. And ultimately, it's interesting because most of us would think of data quality as a technical problem, and then so you have the biggest technical problem, and then the biggest sort of like operational problem right there side by side. And of course there's nuances. Again, don't bother to read the tiny print, but there's nuances when we slice and dice based on various other dimensions. But in general, the top 5 remain. And I just wanted to share here just an example. So I will, if you want to get access to it, you can do this slicing and dicing yourself based on whatever dimensions you're interested in. But for example, this is just an example to see the head of data, for example, and the CTO sort of job profile groups. They both list the same 2 challenges like before, but they're flipped. So the head of data seems to care more about data quality, while the CTO seems to care more about the alignment problem. And so a similar pattern we see with the engineer and the architect, where they both have the exact same challenges listed at their number 1 and their number 5, but exactly flipped. So the data architect seems to care more about data governance and the engineer more about data quality. So these are the sort of nuances that you can go into with yourself. This is the link that I promised at the beginning of the talk. So if you sign up, we will send you the report once it's published. These are just some of the dimensions that you can slice the data on. So the takeaways. So the one key hopeful insight about the European data landscape. So 100% of organizations completed at least one major data initiative last year. The number 1 trend in how organizations seems to structure their data function: decentralized to grow fast, centralized to scale, and then settle on a hybrid federated model to support growth at scale at the very largest organizations. The most frequent problem in data is alignment of data initiatives with business strategy, and the most painful problem in data is data quality. And that's it for my talk.